Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that presentation by Ronald. Next up, we've got Barry McMahon, who's prepared a presentation for us to show you guys today, and I think he'll be sticking around for some Q&A afterwards as well. So Barry's responsible for the Identity and Access Management Division internationally for LogMeIn, and the topic that he's discussing is the value of identity in the digital environment. So we'll bring Barry up shortly and enjoy.
Hey everyone, as the slide says, my name is Barry McMahon. I'm the Senior International Manager at LastPass, which is part of LogMeIn. Today I'm going to talk to you about the value of identity in the digital environment. I should also point out that there's a good portion of my presentation which takes from some key findings of a report that LastPass sponsored IDC to produce, specifically on the APAC region. I'm more than happy to share that with you if you want to reach out to me after the presentation. And I have other collateral that I'll mention throughout the presentation that if you want access to it or copies of it, please do email me. So let's get into it. The agenda. We're going to look at the market view and the internal view. We're going to look at some market forces. We're going to look at the CEO agenda. We're going to look at delivering on trust and the challenges associated with that. We're going to look at the opportunity associated with them challenges and some ways you can solve them challenges and really harness them opportunities. And then I'm going to leave you with some key takeaways. So I wanted to focus on one global report in particular. I could have chosen from the Mandiant report. I could have chosen from the Verizon report. I could have chosen the CrowdStrike. Numerous other reports, including our own LastPass Global State of the Password report. But for this particular presentation, I wanted to just focus on the Allianz Risk Barometer report of 2020. This year's report is based on insights from just over 2,700 risk management experts from over 100 countries and territories worldwide. And, getting into the detail of the report, key finding and the big thing about the report this year is that cyber incidents are ranked as the #1 business risk, coming in at 39%. This is versus a position of 7% in 2013, where only 15% said that cyber incidents were a risk. And there's a list of sectors there, the top 6 sectors that mentioned cyber incidents as the biggest risk: aviation, financial services, government and public services, professional services, technology, and telecommunications. Additionally, the report was able to identify some key trends. And some of the trends are around the size and the expense associated with different data breaches. We see that the size of the Marriott, the Equifax, and Capital One data breaches ranging into the millions of records, I should say, that were compromised. We also see a growth in business email compromise. Earlier this year, the FBI in the US said that since 2016, there's been worldwide losses of at least 26 billion due to business email compromise. And such attacks typically involve social engineering and phishing emails to pretty much dupe or con employees and senior management into revealing login credentials so that they can make fraudulent transactions. We see litigation prospects rising. A number of large breaches have triggered class actions by consumers or investors. For example, again, Equifax in July 2019 reached a 700 million settlement for its 2017 data breach. And then finally, we see mergers and acquisitions bring in cybersecurity issues. So if we look at Marriott, who acquired Starwood in 2016, that breach can be traced back to an intrusion in 2014 in Starwood. So that was sitting in their network and on their network for 4 or 5 years. So as I said, cyber incidents, #1 risk globally. It's also just important to note that while it's the #1 risk globally across them sectors that I've mentioned there, it's a very close second in a lot of other sectors. So take, for example, transportation. We see business interruption ranks as #1 at 32%, with cyber risk ranking, the cyber incidents ranking at #2 at 30%. And it's a new entrant. Cyber incidents are a new entrant into that particular area with 30% this year. So as you can see, it's a real eye opener globally in terms of cyber incidents and the risks that they're posing. It's also worth noting that regardless of the org size, cyber incidents is ranked either first or second. So for the small enterprise, it's ranked number 1, but in the other 2 segments, if you like, the medium and large businesses, it ranks second. So if it's ranking that high, what do Allianz say are the causes of the cyber incidents? Well, in first place, at 77%, it's data or security breach. At 62%, it's espionage, hacker, ransomware, denial of service. And in third place, it's employees, mistakes by employees, coming in at 42%, which is quite high. Another area that I wanted to just hone in on was the NDB report. You know, I enjoy as much as anyone can enjoy reading the NDB report because it lays things out in a really succinct and detailed fashion. And so what we've seen in H1 of 2020 was that there was 518 data breaches notified. We have 61% where malicious or criminal attacks are the leading cause. We have 85% of them breaches involved information of 1,000 individuals or less. And then the top 5 sectors where the breaches notifications came from were health, finance, education, insurance, and legal. So how did these breaches happen? Well, as we can see there, 34% were down to human error, 5% were down to system fault. So human error would, you know, encompass wrong email recipient, you know, maybe loss of paperwork or device, or unauthorized accidental disclosure. System fault would, you know, cover unintended access or unintended publication. And then we would have then the malicious or criminal attacks, like I mentioned, coming in at 61% earlier. And they are relating to cyber incident, social engineering, rogue employees, and paper or device, paper storage or device storage theft. It's worth noting actually that in the first half of 2020 there was a rise in insider threat and social engineering, even compared to the 2019 reports. And I guess that probably isn't surprising, really, given that remote work has been, you know, enforced upon us, and many of us will be working remotely going forward. That, you know, we're an easy target for hackers and people looking to con us out of credentials. And so, move on to the internal view. So, is there a common problem? Well, your IT teams and security teams may be reporting in an increase in these type of errors popping up, given people are working more remotely and we're trying to get people more productive. So as you can see here, that there's an ID10T error has occurred. The location of the error is between the keyboard and the chair. You have to eliminate that problem before proceeding any further. Or the error 27C problem exists between keyboard and chair. And look, for me, it's easy to say that these errors are the source of the problem, but actually the source of the problem is that the people don't have the right tools and aren't enabled to do their jobs in a secure manner. Cybersecurity and cybercrime is hard for people to get their heads around. You know, people don't see themselves individually as a risk, and you know, if they're not prepared and they're not on their guard, you know, all the time, that they're potentially a weak point within the organization, well then, you know, they are a potential access point for con people. So, you know, for me, I think that when we talk about cybersecurity within the industry, I think we alienate a lot of people. Particularly the word cyber sounds very futuristic and complex. You know, I know that when I was studying, if someone mentioned applied physics or even physics to me, I would have zoned out. And that's how an awful lot of people see cybersecurity. So if we make it that it's not an inclusive conversation, people will disengage, and that's absolutely what you don't want, particularly when it comes to securing the business, and particularly when you see 42% is down to human error in the Allianz report, and you see it as a constant error, a constant area for concern in the NDB report. And that's how a lot of the board and senior management see it too. They see it as something complex that they don't understand, or maybe they can't understand. And so that needs to change. So switching to the market forces, let's see what's putting security on the boardroom agenda. And as the business goes more digital, different forces drive the board to focus on different business models with different threats. And this is now where we get into more the detail from the IDC and LastPass sponsored report. So just going through a couple of these different forces operating in the climate of uncertainties, right? You know, we've seen natural disasters, obviously cyber attacks, the extended uncertainty around the period around COVID-19, and the pressures that's placed on businesses to operate and be productive and still be competitive. You know, across the APAC region, a work from home mandate has pushed an uptake in video meetings, audio conference calls, and collaborating platforms. Securing and validating the identity of the end user accessing them services remotely is more critical than ever. And not all organizations have that culture or experience or the technology to enable and enforce that remote office etiquette. We see organizations now becoming more borderless. You know, by 2024, 25% of Asia's top 1,000 companies in the APAC region will rely on a global, secure, integrated, and collaborative ecosystem that enables enterprises to function as borderless organizations. This is going to require IT security systems that support an online collaborative environment to drive business outcomes. And you know, that's where then the security perimeter gets pushed further and further and further away from the core of the office. We see rising expectations of superior digital experiences. You know, people want to have a really good experience, and they also want to know that it's secure, but they also don't want a lot of friction in how they engage them different experiences. Key investment area to deliver on is digital transformation goals, and that, you know, in doing so, secure by design principles must be core to success. Adopting a highest level of compliance approach, even if it's not mandated, is a driver to engendering trust and transforming the business for competitive agility. We look at the future workforce. According to IDC, again, the APAC Future Workforce Survey, 45% of organizations surveyed have implemented or are planning to implement a contingency plan to address their hiring policies, to fill the gap that is there in terms of digital skills. The growing pool of contingency workers and the move towards collaborative workspaces and rising millennial workforce call for a new flexible workforce policy without sacrificing security. We really start getting into the security side of things here now. We see the lack of IT and security skills, right? So organizations globally are suffering really bad with trying to fill security skill sets. And the APAC area is no different. I think security is probably the only profession globally where there's, you know, greater demand than there is availability of resources, and that's not going to change. So making sure that you can address and make sure that the people within your organization are adding value at every turn, and that they feel valued at every turn, particularly from the security side of the house, will be very important, because if not, they will leave. And then we see the crisis of digital trust, right? Bad decisions, poor leadership, complexity, cybercrime result in breaches that have significant impact on businesses and customers. New approaches such as zero trust are starting to prove themselves. Identity and access management is the #2 investment priority for APAC businesses and organizations. Moving the security strategy from the system or device to the new control plane of data, application, and identity is considered to be the best strategic and comprehensive approach. And so now we look at the CEO's new agenda in the digital economy, and you know, aligning to the forces that we just mentioned earlier on. We see that trust comes in ahead of delivering innovative experience at scale and ensuring reliability and digital services and experiences. And so, that begs the question, why is trust so important? Well, in the corporate world, trust is high on the agenda. With trust, you can gain loyal customer base, build a strong brand, resulting in a strong market presence. For an organization addressing the target market, if they can gain their target market's trust, then they can be very successful. Trust is about making people feel a certain way, and people feel very strongly about how their data is handled. To do business in the digital economy, people need to share data such as address, name, date of birth, credit card details, etc. Without that, in the digital economy, you don't have a business. And one of the ways that organizations can maintain their trust is through protecting data. The digital economy is data-driven, and it's extremely important to protect all data. Managing the access to data and business applications goes a long way to mitigating the risk of a data breach and severely limiting the potential risk exposure to your brand. I mentioned Equifax earlier on. I mentioned their data breach. And a recent CSO Online article published reported that 2 years after the breach, the company said it has spent $1.4 billion on cleanup costs, including incremental costs to transform their technology and improve their application network and data security. And then, if that wasn't enough, in June 2019, Moody's downgraded the company's financial rating, in part because of the massive amounts it would need to spend on InfoSec in the years to come. So even though they were trying to do the right thing now, they're still feeling the after effects of that breach. So when organizations are evaluating the risk exposure to the business through audits, a large area of focus is typically who has access to what, why do they have access, and do they still need access? The reality is, if you don't take access management seriously, you're running a serious risk of being breached. So now we look at how we deliver on that trust. Right. So given the forces influencing the boardroom agenda and the CEO priority, this slide details the top goals to achieve trust. And the interesting thing here about this graph is that while MFA and passwordless and the access controls are in 6th and 7th place here respectively, they're actually core to achieving the deliverance here in the top 3, protecting internal and sensitive data and disclosure, implementing data privacy requirements, and improving the ability to remain compliant and anticipate future compliance standards. So while it's great to see, the multi-factor and passwordless authentication and confined sensitive data access to a defined user group, they are actually core to delivering on the top 3, and they can all be delivered with identity and access management solutions. One of the challenges is time, right? Where are people spending their time, and how can we, understanding where to spend their time and then understanding where the value is associated with that time. So again, with the IDC report, enterprises with at least 500 plus employees surveyed by IDC have an average of 23 full-time employees in their IT security department, with more resources focused on IAM than in any other security area. Identity solutions with improved ease of use and greater automation can help cut down on time spent on managing users and identities, which in turn ensures better use of security resources elsewhere. Deploying a comprehensive identity and access management strategy is not about removing headcount from the business, and that's an important point to note. And it's not about doing more with less people. It's about people in the security team adding value where it matters, and considering the importance of threat management and the other areas, the ability to transfer valuable resources by improving identity and access management efficiencies would be considered a strategic move and one that adds value. And even if you just look at the graph there, you can see that at 29.1%, you'd have to think that there is a better way of doing identity management, and that these surveyed accounts are doing, that they can then bring that percentage down, but then spend more time on vulnerability management, threat management, and trust management. Next challenge is obviously resource and technology. right? And so it makes sense to have your IT security team focus on adding value to what they do, because finding people to do the tasks is getting harder and harder. Finding security skills the world over is difficult, and APAC is no different. And as the slide says, 30% of APAC organizations suffer from a lack of skills to ensure reliable, secure digital services. And we see that, Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand are above average. It makes it harder to get the right people. So if you have people working on tasks where they feel they're not adding value, then you will not hold on to them. In addition, if you're looking for staff and the tasks you want them to focus on are, manual in the extreme, you won't get them people to join the company. And so if we move into the second part of the slide, we can see the businesses are still warming up to MFA and Federation for enhanced security. 23.4% of APAC organizations plan to deploy MFA for all users' access and sensitive data. 30.4% of the same organizations are considering or piloting identity federation plans. But concerningly, 29% or just over 29% surveyed are not even considering this. Federation, so the linking of a person's single authentication across multiple systems, will increase in adoption as more organizations realize its value in simplifying security and reducing the amount of administration to free up resources for other critical security roles, as discussed on the previous slide. And so this is where we get into the way forward part of the presentation. So how do we address them challenges and opportunities? Well, along with IDC, we've identified 5 drivers to support business needs. Now, I'm not going to go in through all of these. I'm going to look in more detail on driver number 2, 4, and 5. But this is where we start to align the business needs, the influences of the business, the IT security challenges, finding a common thread. And so driver number 2 focuses on managing identity at digital scale to enable digital transformation. From a business perspective, there are departments out there who are deploying solutions in isolation. And as the solutions are being sold to the business function and not the IT buyer, that creates a big problem. So, the security challenge here is where decentralized tasks occur and security is not involved, how can they reduce that risk exposure? Well, the solution is in providing a consistent approach to access and authentication to reduce the exposure to internal and external threats. So the likes of MFA and SSO across all competitive apps, and then EPM or enterprise password management for what SSO cannot cover. And then for where and when security is involved and they add that stamp of credibility, then that also elevates the project that the other departments are trying to roll out. This also tries to help address the driver in the last slide about user experience, or sorry, in stage 1 about user experience. If it's uniform across all entry points, then people will know what to expect and they get comfortable with it. As was the case pre-COVID-19, workforce mobility was on the rise. Again, consistency at scale here adds huge value. Having the same experience in scaling across apps and geographies is a huge benefit. It's also important to note that with the right identity solution and being able to roll that out and give the uniform experience across the board, it doesn't matter then where the person works from, if they're in the office to have the same experience or if they're working from home to have the same experience, bringing greater security to your business. Look at driver number 4 then, integrating identity to support operational excellence. Every business is looking for efficiencies. And with security, we have people who we want to have working smarter, not harder. And that means taking the low value tasks away from them, or certainly automating a lot of tasks. But for security, the challenge is that with disparate solutions and poor not for fit for purpose deployments, these result in low value tasks that need manual support, manual integration, which leads to challenges in the talent retention. So the solution here is really to drive for a unified approach of services, which can lead to a more comprehensive security covering with fewer blind spots that can be easily managed with vendors that keep adding value through their service offering. This results in security focusing on the bigger picture and being able to be involved or get involved in the projects that they should be involved in. This leads to better staff retention as they're working on more impactful things, reducing operating costs by doing things in a more efficient manner, and then the automation of low-value tasks, which can support compliance and leave no single points of failure aligned to a particular person if and when they might leave the business. Successful identity environment requires multiple elements and management dashboards, but adding complexity through deployment of multiple disparate tools is actually counterproductive to security team and environment needs. And so again, here you can see that by having a better, more streamlined approach within the security team and within the tools and the offerings that the security team has, they can then be more efficient and drive more operational excellence of which the business puts a lot of value in. And then we move on to driver number 5, managing enterprise risk through trusted identity. And this is where the business sees security team as a true value driver, full alignment between business and security teams. But the security challenge here is that really it's the combination of all of the previous drivers. Embracing trusted identity can align the risk appetite of the business. So if identity is a new perimeter, then contextually aware authentication can apply policies based on user conditions. Fostering good cyber hygiene through the right tools and awareness can reduce the risk profile from phishing, insider threat, as we've seen, is growing earlier on, and third-party supply chain vulnerabilities. If everything is focused on identity, then security can embed right at the core of the business decisions and strategy. And this is a clear value add. Security driving down the risk through risk optimization. And so what does a unified security offering look like? Well, it looks like this. So some of you may be one of the 25 million people globally that use LastPass personally, or work in one of the 70,000 organizations worldwide that use our LastPass business solution. LastPass Enterprise is a password manager and SSO solution in one, because we believe that SSO only covers part of the password challenge, and a password manager covers the rest. So our SSO solution is fully self-service, no PS required for setup. All instructions are on our website for each of the 1,200 plus apps that you can integrate with. Then we have LastPass MFA, which can be purchased as standalone or as part of the bundle, which I'll speak about next. LastPass MFA is the biometric-based MFA with many policy controls in the background, such as geofencing login, approved IP address range, approval for time of day of week access, for example. And then, as I mentioned, when you bundle them together, you get our LastPass identity. So you get the password manager, you get SSO, and you get multi-factor authentication, or MFA, all in one. So SSO and password manager to manage the access, and MFA to authenticate that access request. So some key takeaways then, very briefly from me. You're not just building for the short term. Digital business is becoming the only form of business, and this must be a long-term strategy. Individuals, as we've seen in the NDB report and seen in the Allianz report, and we see in loads of different reports, they are the unwitting threat vector. Help them overcome this issue and empower them to do the right thing. IT security is mostly overwhelmed, and we've seen that through some of the challenges in terms of disparate solutions, in terms of headcount focus, etc. So finding automated and user-friendly alternatives means that you will be able to hold on to your scarce resource. The prevalence of cloud is changing our control points. So identity is core to delivering the CEO priority of trust. Ensure it gets sufficient attention. And then last but not least, business investments need to align to positive outcomes. Trust as an enabler is the friend of IT security. And so I'd just like to finish up by saying thanks very much for listening to my presentation. This is a picture of the IDC report that I've mentioned a couple of times throughout my presentation. There's my email address. Please do reach out to me for a copy of the presentation, a copy of the IDC report, or with any questions or queries you may have. Thank you very much, and have a good day.